What's going on, everybody? Nick is here with you on Walk-Ins Welcome. Excited to have another episode. I say Nick is with you because Michael is not. He had to take a personal day today, but I am excited to bring a guest with us to do today. It's Ayo Omojola. I'll get to that in a minute, but as always on the Walk-Ins Welcome podcast, we're here to help you get more patients, deliver better care, get repeat visits, and scale your clinics. We have been on an AI journey together, and I am so psyched to have Ayo with us. Let me do a quick introduction here. So, Ayo is the founder and CEO of Substrate AI. It's a company that uses AI to automate revenue cycle management for healthcare providers, just like your urgent care. Ayo has a deep background in healthcare technology, AI, and finance automation. And I'll get to that in a second because he's done some cool stuff like Square, Cash App, those kind of things. But before he was with Substrate and founding that company, he was the chief product officer at Carbon Health. And I believe, Ayo, correct me if I'm wrong, you 20x'd that company in the seat that you held. That's just nuts. We're going to get into that for sure. So
yeah, you're not wrong, and it takes a village is what I'll say.
I love it. So the expertise, though, it spans from AI-driven automation into fintech, into healthcare operations. I mean, this guy is the go-to in healthcare AI. So excited to welcome you to the podcast. Ayo, say hello to the Walk-Ins Welcome audience and tell us one thing about you that no one else knows.
Thanks, Nick, for having me.
Absolutely.
Super stoked to be here. One thing about myself that no one knows, for the audience, I didn't really have time to prepare for this question, so I'm just going to use one that comes top of mind. So when I was 25, in a previous life, I went traveling around the world with my best friend, and we spent a month on a cargo ship going from Singapore to Brazil.
You spent a month on a cargo ship from Singapore to Brazil.
We did.
I'm trying to imagine.
We were not stowaways, but we were on the cargo ship.
I immediately went to stowaway. I have to be honest with you. So, all right, so y'all were passengers, like meant to be there, passengers.
Yeah.
So I bet you have all kinds of stories you could share there. What in the world were you doing on a boat out going to Brazil in the middle of the ocean on a cargo ship? What were you doing? Were you working?
No, I was reading, and I watched seasons 1 and season 2 of The Office.
I mean, like, I really, honestly, if I could just get away from here for a month and just watch The Office, that's a win to me.
It was great. Like,
who's your favorite character?
The Steve Carell guy.
Okay, yeah, I don't blame you for that. Yep.
Also, remember, this was almost 20 years ago.
No, I get that. Like, I'm a Dwight Schrute fan. He keeps the thing rolling for me, so I'm a big fan of that. I love it, man. Well, listen, bro, seriously, thank you for coming on the podcast. You and I met at the Merchant Medicine Symposium. And the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast, and I know you'll recall this, you were a featured speaker and AI came into the conversation. And it was almost like a completely foreign language to all these urgent cares. And these are like the top brass of urgent cares in the room, right? And I can't remember if it was you. I think it was you. Somebody said, who's heard of ChatGPT? And like nobody raised their hand. Hundreds of people in the room. And I'm going, man, that's been out for like 2 years. Just set that up for a second. I got to know from your perspective what it was like being an AI guru, talking to people who had no clue what AI was.
Yeah. I wouldn't call myself an AI guru.
I do. It's good. We're giving you the title for this podcast.
Well, I'll take it.
There you go.
So I would say that was a seminal moment for me, actually, because prior to that, I kind of had this perspective that, like, just playing it back, Carbon, I think today, something like 90% of Carbon's visits utilize an AI scribe that we built.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been a game changer for the business. And so I'd like been living that life and watching that thing grow for a long time, and kind of expected that everybody else had that thing. And so I think that the question I asked was, how many people here have used AI, for example, an AI scribe in their practice, or have a provider in their practice using AI? And I think it was 150 people, and maybe 2 people raised their hands. That just convinced me that it was so early.
Yeah.
It took me like a week for it to sink in, but I went from thinking, oh man, like everybody's using AI already, and we need to build these like really advanced things. And now and after that interaction, I kind of changed my perspective to, wow, there's so much more leverage that providers can get if they adopt these tools, and they just haven't yet. I think most people just don't know even what's possible.
Right. Right. I mean, it's unreal because that it's not like that was years ago. That was just several
Yeah,
months
that
ago.
was like 3 or 4 months ago. Yeah.
I know. I was just like, and I'm going. I'm in a room full of people. I use AI every day, not sometimes,
Yeah.
like every day, and these guys don't even know what it is. So, well, look, you answered the call. You've come up with Substrate AI. So something tells me you had already been boiling over this or already developing this, and it was already a thing. But that had to have been just like a linchpin. I've got to do this. Clearly, there's a market. So,
Mm.
tell me about Substrate AI. What is it? And what problem are you solving with it?
Yeah. So the way that I would describe it is Substrate is building browser-based AI agents for healthcare, starting with revenue cycle. Um, Zooming out of the buzzwords, what it really means is in every practice, there's a bunch of people who, there's a bunch of employees who a large proportion of their jobs is clicking buttons. And the examples I would give are, um, if you do testing and you're updating your CLIA licenses, if you have somebody in your practice who works denials and they log into payer portals and they go into your practice management system and they download patient records and they look at them and they go back into the payer portal and they file appeals. Um, Payment posting is another big use case that we're going after, where like a person is looking at ERAs and manually entering the amounts for each code on the claim, um, uh, checking eligibility. You can think of it as everything that happens in a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that you can use large language models to automate. There's a lot of work in what I would describe as healthcare back office, where you just have to pick up the phone and call somebody. You have to pick up the phone and call a payer. You have to create like an appeal letter that's a giant document and it has to be very specific. Um, so we're not really going after those things, but
Mm-hmm.
if it is repetitive click work in the browser, we do that. That is our thing. And so um, just to make it really, really tactical, an example, we have one very large client that has a few hundred back office employees, and they had a team working on claim status and denial. So just checking what has happened with this claim since we submitted the claim.
Right.
They had 10 people on that workflow, and it was just a lot of copy paste. It was really, really repetitive, tedious work.
Mm-hmm.
And that team of 10 was able to do 5 to 7K claims a week.
Oh, wow. So
Um,
10 people are punching out 5,000 to 7,000 different claims.
every week, yeah. And so we came in, helped build some automations for them. And again, it was all browser based. It was very easy. There's not a lot of integration. All we need is a login. And now they have 0 people working on that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing about 60K a week. So they've dramatically flattened the amount of people that spend time on this thing and expanded how many they're able to do. And so that's just an example of the kind of thing that we are trying to do. It's very early. There's a lot of work to do still. I think there's so much opportunity, but at the end of the day, our North Star is we want to help providers get paid, and there are many steps to like doing that. But in our
Mm-hmm.
opinion, the first step is let's just get rid of some of this repetitive grunt work so that the people on your team can focus on things that really are complicated and require like a lot of attention.
I love it. So we spent so much time on this podcast talking about how AI is making healthcare more human, which is great, and we want that. But what this is doing is allowing the more technical side of the business to become more streamlined. I mean, you went from 5 people down to 0 people, and you went from
10 to 0.
7,000. Do what now?
10 people to 0 people.
Sorry, I wrote down. I'm going off my notes. I wrote it wrong. 10 people down to 0 people, that's 10 different payrolls, or 10 people repurposed into doing higher level work.
Yeah, yeah. And I think ultimately what should happen is, and what happened in the specific cases, they just move those people to like other things, because
Sure.
there's just
Yeah.
so many. You know, if you look under the hood at most practices, and as practices get larger, it's so complicated. You're in
Mhm.
multiple states. There's so many sort of people you have to deal with, and processes and policies that you have to adhere to. And I think some of those things are just always going to be human,
Right.
actually. And so our objective isn't, hey, you're going to fire all these people. But like most practices at scale, they struggle to hire. They struggle to fill these roles. And if we can take people who have a lot of context and knowledge about your practice and allow them to do higher leverage things for you, and we can do these basic things, we think that's just, everybody wins. And at the end of the day, you're saving money on headcount, and you're getting paid more, and you're getting
Right.
paid faster. Like, who doesn't want that?
No, I think everybody wants that. I wonder at what point it'll cross the line as far as like, instead of repurposing people, at, you know, Io, the average entrepreneur, the average business owner, they're looking to maximize their investment and cut their
Yeah,
costs, right? So I think in addition to automating the problems that our urgent care clinics face every single day, is finding ways to repurpose the people who were doing
those
the
things. Yeah,
task. I think there needs to be just as much focus. And again, I don't know how you feel about this, just as much focus on how can we help transition these people where they're still good team members, good employees, adding real value to our patients. That's going to be a challenge, I think, in the future.
yeah. So to be honest, I don't think that's going to be as much of a challenge as we think. So
Okay.
one of the things that we found at Carbon is, and this may have just been a function of our approach, and I could totally be wrong about this, but almost all the ways that we deployed AI helped
Mm,
increase quality. So we deployed an AI scribe. It's used in sort of 80 or 90% of visits. Um, what ends up happening is the provider gets to put the iPad next to them and talk to the patient. And
yes.
so NPS is higher, like the provider is like much more attentive. They're
Mm,
much more descriptive. And what ends up, the way these AI scribes, the feed, um, they really leverage the provider's thought process. So the provider has to like say more words actually to make
mhm.
sure the algorithm is doing its thing. But the side benefit of that is now they're explaining the rationale to the patient. Do you know what I mean? So it's just
Yeah.
like the quality and density improves. One of the other sort of surprising examples, we spent a bunch of time, me and at the time he was our CEO, but he's currently CEO, Karam, spent a bunch of time listening to patient phone calls. So just like
Mm,
a patient calls in, they leave a voicemail, sometimes gets answered. We recorded all those, and we listened to those, and we kind of realized that in a lot of cases, a patient's calling and they're asking about, hey, do you take my insurance? Like, and we look at that as that person wants to come in and see you actually, and they
right.
just need some clarity about like, am I going to the right place? They want to see themselves a drive. Um, and it turned out that I want to say something. I want to say something like 30% of calls had real intent. Like
Mm,
that patient wanted to come see you that day. Everybody who listens to this podcast will know that urgent care is very, last minute. It's a
right.
lot of your, I mean, this podcast is literally called Walk-ins Welcome.
That's it. Walk
Um,
on in.
and so we created a process where all of that information, we would have an AI listen to the call, summarize it, extract if that person intended to come in, extract like a couple of other things, try and match the patient with a patient in our system, um, and we surface that to the clinic managers, who would then call the patient to try and get them to come in to basically
Oh,
try and answer their question.
right.
And the last I heard, we had something like a 95% conversion rate on those patients calling in. Like, it was
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
And we're able to do that and drive top line without any reduction in headcount, a real increase in quality, because that patient really, like, they got to talk to a human who was really knowledgeable and was trying to be like, hey, yes, come in today.
Yeah.
And it also had other benefits. Like, we realized in certain areas we weren't doing a good job of communicating prescriptions to pharmacies. So we're getting a lot of pharmacy calls. So like there's all these things that become possible when you have like a human level of intelligence paying attention to your system, and you're applying it in these strategic ways.
So I like this idea of using the AI more in a support role and letting the human aspect be the heavy lifting piece of it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I think I do think, and you made this comment that stuck with me around you have good team members who are committed, and the healing process starts the moment a patient walks in the door. And so having somebody at the front desk who is attentive and not harried and not bored, who has like technology doing a bunch of what really are tedious things that should be handled by technology. That I'd like literally everybody wins. Like you're going to keep your staff longer. You're going to have less turnover. Patients are going to be happier. I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't do that, actually.
It's funny that you mentioned that about the front desk, people that are engaged, people that care that you're there. Healing starts when you walk in the door. I love that. That would be a whole episode. As a matter of fact, I may save that for later, just to be honest with you. But it reminds me of a story I've told before, but it's been a long time since I've told it. When I was in college, I went to an urgent care, and there was this, to me was old. I was 20 at the time. So, she probably wasn't that old, but but anyway, I remember when I was checking out, here I am 20 and she hands me a sucker and I'm like, what's this for? She goes, everybody needs to feel like an 8-year-old kid when they feel bad. And I'm like, man,
yeah,
that's right. Like, I do want to feel that way. You're right. Take care of me.
And AI can't do that. You can't technology that away.
No, you can't. But it did remind me of that. Like that healing starts at the door. Well, I mean, to be human is to heal and to harm if you're not careful, but definitely to heal, right?
Yeah.
So be careful with that as well. Something that you mentioned is that I want to talk a little bit about Substrate for a second. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I like the way you worded it. You said it's fixing the revenue cycle, right? Which automatically implies that it's broken. So let's talk about that. Why is it broken, and how is Substrate AI filling in that gap and fixing it?
Oh man, do you have 3 hours?
I do, but our listeners don't.
Yeah. I think revenue cycle is broken for so many reasons.
Okay.
And this isn't an original thought, but I think it really rings true, which is you can explain 99% of the things that happen in revenue cycle with one insight, which is that payers don't want to pay providers.
There it is.
And I think that's like a cynical perspective, but it is really hard to look at the facts on the ground and not think it's true. Like it, and so I'll give a couple of examples. So for our clients, we do a lot of appeals. Medical record requests are a common one. And a frequent denial reason is claim was denied for medical necessity. Please submit, medical records and prior authorization. But the practice they did a prior auth for so the payer has it already,
right?
So the payer knows, like the payer, sometimes it was like the prior auth was done like that day for like that service,
right?
And so I think of that as like, pessimistically, it kind of looks like the payer is just throwing up friction and roadblocks to force the provider to staff, to force the practice to staff humans, and just eventually miss them. And in that world, another thing that supports the idea that payers don't want to pay you is that, if I as a patient walk in the door, I get care, the practice submits a claim, the practice doesn't get paid, the payer actually has the best of all worlds. Yeah. Their member is better. They got the care they need. The payer got the data because it all came in the claim, and the payer didn't pay anyway.
I know.
So they got free care. They got all the data they need. They know that, sort of what was done during the visit. So I say all that to say, it sure does seem like payers don't want to pay you. Um, I can share like 5 or 6 more examples. There are crazy things that happen when you like go down this rabbit hole where one of my favorite examples from a couple days ago is if you go into a payer portal
Mm-hmm.
and you look up, like I'll just use the blues for example, and you look up a claim, the information available to you about what happened with that claim is different if you do the lookup via patient demographics, so like name, date of birth, patient ID, versus if you look up the claim via claim number.
Wow.
Like crazy, really, really crazy, crazy
That's
things.
crazy.
And I just don't know what rational. I cannot come up with a reason why you would design a system that way. Because now what's happened is like for a lot, like this is a recent insight for me, so I didn't know this, but I'm
Right.
just thinking of all the billers throughout history who have like shown up at a claim and thought the claim was denied for one reason when it was denied for another reason.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And that's
No, I know exactly what you mean.
like everybody listening on this call, everybody they know has had a doctor's visit over the course of their life where this happened, where like
Mm-hmm.
the claim was denied and somebody went and looked and like couldn't figure it out, and the practice ultimately ended up not getting paid. And I think it's just a so anyway, so I think there
It's
are many reasons
sinister,
why it's
man. It
broken, and
is
there's lots of
sinister.
evidence.
There's no nice way to say it.
It does kind of feel sinister.
It is. I remember it's just one of my favorite movies is The Incredibles. Have you seen it?
Yeah,
So, Mr. Incredible living his boring insurance life, and the little old lady sitting across the desk, "You're denying my claim?" And then he's like, "Yes, but I'm covered." "Okay, I can't tell you to go to this person at this place and fill out this form and turn it in on this color sheet. And I can't help but think that your software does this for you." Like that's what it does. It's like right when it fires back denied claim, it goes and instead of looking it up by the patient, it looks up by the claim number and then fixes it. It grabs it. It does all these things. That's a
yeah,
thousand clicks. And here it does it in seconds. And that, in my opinion, is where Substrate just shines, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. So just closing the loop. So um, a big part of our hypothesis, and we're still early in this. We've only done a couple of things that we ultimately think we can do. Is um, we just don't think that your staff should have to deal with this. They just
Mm,
shouldn't. And so ultimately, in all these flows, eligibility, charge entry, denials, payment posting, um, overpayments, like
mhm.
the fact that you get a physical letter that someone has to like go read and say, oh, they're going to take money from this visit that happened 9 months ago. I just don't think people should have to deal with that. Actually,
Well, I mean, look, I'm not trying to be insensitive here, and I'm not trying to blame a person, but when a CEO of a major insurance company gets murdered in the street in just like plain sight, and people don't immediately go, "Oh my God, that's terrible." They sit back and go, like that. I mean, sucks for you, dude. Like, and I don't feel that way, but what I'm saying though is like it's so broken that
yeah,
people are justifying murder because that's how
as a
broken it
consequence,
is, right? So I'm not justifying that. What I'm just simply saying is like people have been abused by their insurance companies. Clinics have been abused by the insurance companies for so long that they're justifying this stuff. And it's really nice to see a solution that's going to connect all those dots and really just kind of fight for your clinic. I feel like it's
yeah,
going to battle for you, you know?
that like we really do think of ourselves as if we win, in order for us to be successful, providers will get paid, and that's like the job actually.
Mm,
And I think there's a version of this. This is like many years away, but I outlined the pessimistic case that payers just don't want to pay you. I think
mm,
optimistically, I think like payers are also large, very disorganized entities
right.
where like one hand doesn't talk to the other, and so um, this is going down a tangent a little bit, but I think this is important. It's an important question people ask all the time, which is if we're successful, ultimately, payers do view this as a zero-sum game, and they will fight back.
Right.
And so I think at scale, the thing that we are going to try to do is give very similar tools to payers, actually, to help
Mhm.
them actually create more money that can go to paying for care. So, like, if you don't have to pay for all this headcount to do these things,
Mhm.
actually, all of a sudden, there's like more of a pool of money that can go to paying for patient care. And I think that's how we make the pie bigger. The way we make the pie bigger is, hey, as a payer, you should instantly tell a provider whether or not they're going to get paid. So they should have that confidence, and you should give them instant responses about claims that you submit. Um, and and you shouldn't have hundreds of thousands of people in India, Guatemala, the Philippines physically looking at these things. You should have a system that does it automatically, and you should spend that money on care instead.
So what you're saying, if I'm hearing this the right way, is the insurance companies are going to make the profit that they're going to make to satisfy their shareholders. And in order for them to do that, because they're not going to change in that mindset, then we have to find a way to feed the beast in such a way that it doesn't mind sharing its food with the urgent care clinics. So, like, we need to free up some of their money in other areas in their own businesses so that when they are paying the claims that they're responsible for paying, they can still make the profits and targets that they're trying to hit. And then that could, at the end of the day, it's still greedy, but at the same time, it's also like it's serving a purpose for everybody, not just for them.
I think that's a good way to put it. I
Okay.
think, barring like neither you nor I are going to like run for office.
No.
So, and I think barring like a change in the structure of how healthcare is paid for, like if you believe that the way healthcare is paid for is going to remain the same for like the next couple of decades, then we kind of have to. I don't see another way.
Yeah.
And a thing that I would hate is I hate the idea that um, like we no startup can fix if payers don't want to pay you if it's like an actual malice thing. But I
Yeah.
hate the idea that like some of the reason that your care or my care or my mom's care might not get paid for is just because a payer was inefficient. That feels crazy to me. Like, why would you want that?
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, if you clean up the inefficiencies, I think there'll be a season. In all honesty, this is the cynic in me, and I don't mean to be this way, but
Yeah,
what'll happen in this scenario is there'll be a season where something like that would clean up those profits so that they can pay, and then they'll find creative ways to not pay again. That's
yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't mean to be cynical like that. It's just been what's happened,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
I don't think it's that cynical. I think it's a real thing. The one caveat, and I'll let this go. Payers are regulatorily constrained in how much profit they can make
Okay.
uh, through sort of medical loss ratios and so on. And so I do think actually there's just like a lower bound where like a payer can't just have like 50% margin on premium. They're
Right.
like literally not allowed. And so
Right.
so a lot of what I'm thinking of is if you can use software to eat the operating expenses, that extra surplus, some of it the payer's going to eat, like they just
Yeah.
are, because
Yeah.
like we live in a capitalist society. But some of the payers going to pay out to providers, and I would rather live in that world than live in a world where um, there's somebody at a practice like clicking buttons to get claims paid, and then somebody at a payer clicking buttons to deny those claims.
Right. I mean, you gotta feel like they're sitting back to back though, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
or like they're across the screen from each other and go, "Hey, I'm about to send one to you. Can you go ahead and deny that? It's approved, but I need you to deny it." No,
yeah,
I don't want to live in that world either, man. I hope that doesn't happen. But that does
yeah.
bring up the future of AI in healthcare. So let's go down that road. We're running out of time because I'm having such a good time talking to you. But we see a slow adoption rate in the healthcare industry, but it's coming. We're going to see it. So what do you see? I mean, what do you see with the revenue cycle, how it's managing clinics, what's changing in the industry? Where
Yeah,
is AI having an impact in healthcare?
yeah. Um, we're so gonna run out of time because I have so many examples.
Do it.
But uh, so the very obvious one is the scribes. They're just like a lot of scribes out there. They're partnering with everyone, and I think as a practice. I think I said this at the conference. You just have to try it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all perfect. They're not all exactly the same, but the reality is they're like most of them are mostly good enough that some of the time it will save you the carpal tunnel of typing out, hundreds of characters
Right.
as a provider and as a practice. I think they also, as a provider, you do have to change how you conduct a visit. Like you have to be a lot more vocal about what you're saying and what you're doing and what you're thinking about. But one of the effects we found was our documentation at Karma was like just way more complete as a consequence. Like there's just
Mm-hmm.
a lot more context in there than what was available when a doctor was just typing out notes. So I think the scribes are a very obvious category that I think that is here to stay, and
Right.
and I wouldn't be surprised if a decade from now it would you would almost look skeptically at someone who at a clinician who didn't use scribe because
Right.
they're just like it's like a memory tool. Like why wouldn't you do this thing? So that's one. Um, there's a company I spent some time with and invested in called Charta Health that I think
Spell
is pretty
that
interesting.
because I didn't hear you quite clear.
Charta, Charta
Okay.
Health, and they take a pretty interesting tack where they go after audits,
Okay.
and so they say, hey, you have an audit program where somebody looks at visit notes and figures out does documentation support CPT codes, was it coded at the right level, and so on, and scores them, and then that feeds into a process of talking to providers. But you do that once a quarter for every provider. You only look at 4 or 5 visits per provider. You have a team doing it, and what they do is they take your process, they configure a large language model around it, and then they help you audit 100% of your visits,
That's
and they do
cool.
it in real time. So you every day are like, hey, you know, we did 1,000 visits yesterday. These 7 were out of compliance, and by the way, 6 of them were like this one provider. So we'll go talk to her.
Okay.
So I think that's an interesting one, and it dovetails into a bigger theme in my head, where if you think of the concept of compliance and audits, it's historically been sampling based. It's historically been you sample some things on some time horizon, and I think what AI makes possible is you can audit everything and you can do it real time. And I do think like for standard of care for malpractice, I actually think that's going to be a really transformational sort of movement. Um, uh, I spent some time in the last couple of days with a company doing model explainability.
Oh,
So it's basically if you have a clinical process that passes through a model, it basically and it comes out with some result. It basically explains how it got there. And so I think again, when I just think of the impact of malpractice and reasoning and being able to surface that to um, a clinician group that that to a clinician that like, hey, there may be something that you missed about this visit, about
mhm.
this patient problem that the model was able to catch, and that kind of improves standard of care. And then the last example I will use is again this. So this one is another company I invested in called Recon Health,
Mhm.
and what they do is use AI to read your contracts and
That's
extract
cool.
all the structure out of your contract for you. So, for example, um, what's timely filing for Blue Cross versus United versus Aetna? What payer policies do you have to adhere to? What are your contract rates for your MDs versus mid levels? They pull all those things out for you, and then they use that to calculate underpayments.
Oh, cool.
And so they help sort of with this revenue optimization problem where like you've negotiated this shiny new contract with payer and they're just
Mhm.
paying you like $2 or $3 less than your contractor rate consistently. Um,
Death
and
by a
they're doing it
thousand
over,
cuts.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they help detect that for you. So like I do think there are things that are around sort of just improving the profile of a business
Mhm.
by improving revenue or improving headcount, and then I think there are things that are around improving the just compliance footprint, just making sure that all care delivered is within the standard of care. And then I think there's many tools that are around just improving the clinical like experience. So like a thing that just like literally makes a doctor's life better. Because like a happier doctor who's less burned out, like who doesn't want that?
Well, I can tell you every patient wants that for sure, right?
Every patient wants that. Every time you walk into a doctor's office, the only thing you care about is that the number one thing that doctor's thinking about is you.
That's right. And for the most part, they do a really good job. I don't want to sell our doctors short. I think for the most part, they do a really good job. It's when they're thinking about the 30 other things that aren't working well, mainly like I'm not getting paid.
They run a
for the work I'm doing.
practice, somebody just quit. Like there's so many things.
Yeah, because at the urgent care level, they're business owners for the most part too, right? I mean, until you get into like a carbon health situation where, you know, at that point, you're probably more of a corporate side of things. But all right, so we're at 35 minutes and I've had a blast and I feel like there's 100 more questions down rabbit holes we could go. I think we're going to have to do a follow-up episode in the near future for sure. And I'll reach out to you about that, but I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast, but I can't go without telling people to go to Substrate.cc, not .com.cc, and we'll drop that in the show notes. But your main call to action is to book a demo, right? So I want to take just a minute before we go off. And I want you to tell us, like, what can they expect in a demo? Who are they going to talk to? What can they expect on there? Is this going to be like, you got to sign up, or is this like, just talk me through the process?
Yep. The demo is pretty simple. You're going to get on a Zoom call with me.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about your problems. How many people you have, how many claims you have, what are you doing with them? What are your major buckets of problems? And then I'm going to show you one of our agents working through a problem. And then you'll be able to see it with your own eyes and decide for yourself if you want to try it. I think, you know, in my closing comment is, if you have billers who work for you, we will save you money. A lot depends on, you know, some people have like really tightly run ships and they're very efficient already, so maybe we'll save them less. And some people are you know, less efficient, but we are going to save you money. Like that is like my, you know, promise.
All right. So that's it, y'all. You're going to get a demo. You're going to get to see how the software is going to work specifically for your clinic. And his guarantee is that he's going to save you money. And I love that. Awesome. Well, listen, you've been having a conversation with me and Ayo, I'm going to say that right. And you just increase your average. If you're the average of the people you hang out, you just increase your average. I want to encourage everybody to go find Ayo. We'll drop his LinkedIn and a link to the website in the show notes. And I want you to go connect with him because he's such a cool guy. I really enjoyed getting to specifically hear from you at the Merchant Medicine Symposium, but we sat down and we had lunch together too. And it was so cool, man. So I just appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for adding value to all these urgent cares that are listening, man. And we hope to see you in the near future.
Thanks, Nick. That is super kind. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right. Bye.